Hello, here's the morning news. Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro revealed further evidence on February's failed coup, this time linking opposition figures in the U.S. and urged Washington to rectify its policy concerning Venezuela. Maduro revealed a Skype call recorded in New York with Carlos Osuna Saraco, a former official of the ex-president Jaime Lucinchi. Venezuelan leader said the text was written in the U.S. and given by an American official to Venezuelan plotters. The document, called the Democratic Transitional Board for National Unity, was to have been read by hooded insurgents after the coup unfolded.
We declare that we do not recognize the spurious and illegal regime led by Mr. Nicolás Maduro Moros, and we urge him to turn over the power he usurped in an unmediated manner so that a transitional government comprised of civilians can be constituted and authentic elections called as soon as possible.
President Nicolás Maduro also confirmed that a delegation from the Union of South American Nations, UNASUR, including Secretary General Ernesto Samper, will discuss measures to stop destabilization efforts and ensure peace in the country. Samper, who will be joined by the foreign ministers of Brazil, Colombia, and Ecuador, was in Venezuela in early February. The regional bloc leader urged dialogue and rejected any violent action threatening the country's stability. In Colombia, news of a military delegation joining the ongoing peace negotiations has sparked hopes for a truce that could lead the ways towards a lasting peace agreement. Our correspondent Natalia Margarita has more on this story.
A military delegation of 5 generals and an admiral will be participating in the peace talks underway in Havana. For member of the Historical Commission for the Conflict, Sergio de Subiría, this latest move is a clear sign of the political willingness to de-escalate the conflict.
It's of a high symbolic value, as it's the first time that active military personnel have participated directly in a negotiation table, putting their military knowledge at the service of a peace process.
As the military delegation is not empowered to make decisions, it is expected to deliver recommendations, especially on the topic of a ceasefire. For Subiría, the military knowledge of combatants will be crucial for the discussion of the technicalities that a ceasefire implies.
It implies mechanisms of endorsement as well as oversight, international participation or not. In this sense, I believe that those who work in war, who work in the military sector, know the difficulties pretty well as the proper path for a bilateral ceasefire.
The discussion between the military officials and the FARC rebels is seen as an important step towards the ultimate goal of the ongoing negotiations in Havana.
We want that the peace process turns into an improvement of people's living conditions, especially in the regions where the conflict has been felt the most. For instance, the FARC's decision of implementing a unilateral ceasefire has already shown important results in humanitarian terms.
As the FARC's unilateral ceasefire has already shown a positive impact, human rights organizations keep on drawing attention to the importance of guaranteeing the continuity of the ceasefire.
We hope the Army also understands that if there is no offensive actions, there would be no defensive actions, and that things can develop in a way that we all understand that peace will benefit the 47 million Colombians.
The encounter between both armed actors involved has offered strong hope to Colombians that have been demanding a bilateral and definitive ceasefire. From Bogotá, Natalia Margarita, teleSUR.
The Chilean government responded to the diplomatic complaint issued in Peru and a scandal involving 3 Peruvian naval officers accused of spying for Chile. Authorities sent the document to Peru's embassy in Santiago, but officials in Lima have only said they are studying the response closely. On Monday, President Ollanta Humala said he had proofs that his government had been spied by Chile and warned the incident could destabilize bilateral relations.
Porque la dignidad del país no tiene.
President Cristina Fernandez announced the nationalization of the railroads, among other projects, in her last speech of Argentinian Congress. Our correspondent Laureano Ponce has this report.
In her speech to Congress, Cristina Fernández de Kirchner announced the renationalization of all railways due to the lack of efficiency that private companies manage the service with, and the creation of state-owned company Ferrocarriles Argentinos.
Private companies have failed. The private companies could have made an effort and profit. But the thing is, obviously, the private sector is not interested in providing efficient service, not interested in economic independence or political sovereignty.
The initiative of the executive branch of centrally managed rail transport, especially in urban areas, aims to positively influence the daily living conditions of the people.
I think there is a traditional logic in Argentine politics that presidents lose power as they are approaching the end of their terms. And Cristina breaks that logic. She reversed it. We could say she's increasingly gaining power. But why? Because she's moving power to the people.
The president also advanced a set of laws designed not only to protect, but to support and encourage local industry and jobs, in addition to another project created by the National Institute of Industrial Technology designed to protect intellectual property of local industrial design.
The other projects are concerned with the defense of national industry, import substitution, supporting the economic activity rate, because we are prioritizing employment and economic activity rate. That means purchasing power for the people, also means expanding the market, import substitution, that's sovereignty, that's his independence.
With these projects, the head of state showed that despite going into an election year, the legislative agenda will remain active until the end of her term. From Buenos Aires, Laureano Ponce, teleSUR.
U.S. Vice President Joe Biden concluded a two-day trip to Guatemala, where he met with regional presidents to discuss measures that would curb migration to the U.S. Biden held meetings with President Salvador Sánchez Serén, Juan Orlando Hernández, and Otto Pérez Molina. The meeting, which follows up from a previous meeting in November in Washington, centered on reforms that would address poverty and violence, which are seen as drivers for migration in the region. Amid thick controversy and just weeks before Israel's presidential elections, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke before the U.S. Congress. He was invited by Republicans and ignored by President Barack Obama. Correspondent Alexandra Hall has the details.
The room may have looked packed, but at least 50 Democrats didn't show up. At Benjamin Netanyahu's address to Congress on Tuesday, the Prime Minister of Israel criticized and warned of the dangers of a U.S. nuclear agreement with Iran.
If the deal now being negotiated is accepted by Iran, that deal will not prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons. It would all but guarantee that Iran gets those weapons, lots of them.
On the same day that Secretary of State John Kerry continued talks on the so-called bad deal, protesters outside Congress called Netanyahu's bluff.
We've been hearing year after year after year the Israelis say, Iran is about to get a nuclear weapon. But Israel has hundreds of nuclear weapons. They won't sign on to any non-proliferation treaty. They won't allow any inspectors. They won't even admit they have nuclear weapons.
According to recent data, a majority of Americans view Netanyahu in a positive light, and 23% say they don't know who he is. But for Jewish Americans, the Israeli leader's actions hit too close to home.
When he proclaims that he speaks not only in the name of his criminal state of Israel, not only in the name of this heretic, anti-Jewish religious state of Israel, but he speaks in the name of all Jews worldwide, is truly insulting.
The fact that House Speaker John Boehner invited Mr. Netanyahu without approval from the White House is a first in U.S. history. Analysts say Netanyahu views himself as part of U.S. politics.
This is a way of shifting the debate, shifting the focus, and pretending like the main issue, which is Israel's ongoing war crimes and human rights abuses against the Palestinians, remains off the front pages. So it's been a very nifty trick.
Nifty and strategic, as Netanyahu finishes up the last 2 weeks of his campaign for a third re-election as Israel's prime minister. His words against Iran won't reach just the American people. Voters at home will also hear him loud and clear. Alexandra Hall, teleSUR, Washington.
And also in the U.S., the Justice Department is scheduled to release its full report into systematic racism by police officers in Ferguson, Missouri. The department said it saw evidence of racial discrimination and violation of rights by police officers, saying African Americans represented 93% of all arrests between 2012 and 2014. African Americans represent 67% of Ferguson population. The mailing of an unarmed black teen, Michael Brown, by white Ferguson police officer Darren Wilson sparked countrywide demonstrations. The 15th African Summit on Climate Change kicked off in the Egyptian capital of Cairo with debate centered around sustainable development and poverty. Every 2 years, the summit elects a country to serve as the headquarters of the group, with Tanzania handing over the pro-tempore presidency to Egypt. African nations are said to be among those most affected by climate change, and the group is to develop joint strategies to present at the World Climate Change Summit in Paris next December. At least one person has been confirmed dead and 14 injured after a huge explosion at the mine in Donetsk. The blast occurred at around 6 a.m. local time. Reports say that some 30 people could have killed. Local authorities say about 70 people were working in the mine when the explosion happened. And the new documentary about Pope Francis's life is set to debut in Argentina next week. The documentary Francis of Buenos Aires looks at the life and work of the Argentine pontiff through extensive archival material and interviews with family and friends. Director Miguel Rodriguez Arias said this is the first work that tells the story of the life of Jorge Mario Bergoglio in the words of the people who know him best. And two American football players and Super Bowl champions donated their brains post-mortem to scientific research into brain trauma. New York Giants punter Steve Weatherford and former Seattle Seahawks receiver Sidney Rice unveiled models of their donations Tuesday. Rice retired from the NFL at the age of 27 over worries about the long-term effects of brain injuries that many players receive. High incidence of degenerative brain disease in former players led thousands of former NFL players sue in the league, winning a settlement over future health costs.
Also, very helpful because...
More on this and other stories on our website, telesurtv.net/English. Have a nice day.